Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. An Introduction to Carnism, 10th Anniversary Edition. By Melanie Joy, Ph.D. Foreword by Yuval Noah Harari. Narrated by Heather Wynne. The greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated. Mahatma Gandhi. Foreword to the 10th Anniversary Edition. If an Olympic-style competition were taking place to determine who was the most miserable creature on Earth today, it is likely that the gold medal candidates competing head-to-head would be the cows, chickens, and pigs we raise to satisfy our whims and needs. Why do these animals have such horrible lives? It may seem like domesticated animals have a good life, especially compared to wild animals. Think of a cow on a dairy farm and a zebra on the African savanna, for example. The zebra spends her entire day searching for food and water, which she doesn't always find. The zebra is constantly threatened by predators, diseases, and natural disasters like floods and droughts. Domesticated cows, in contrast, seem to enjoy the constant care of the farmers who supply them with food, water, vaccines, and medications, and protect them against predators and natural disasters. However, despite what many of us have learned to believe, farm animals live in conditions that we'd probably find reprehensible were they the conditions that dogs or cats lived in. And these individuals nevertheless sooner or later find themselves in the slaughterhouse. Even in instances where farm animals' basic physical needs are met, their social and emotional needs are ignored. Modern agriculture treats these animals as machines for the production of milk, meat, and eggs, and not as creatures with a rich world of feelings and sensations. To understand the emotional world of farm animals, we need to look not merely at their living conditions in 21st century industrialized society, but to those of their ancestors thousands and millions of years ago. Examining historical roots in order to understand modern experience is the province of the scientific field of evolutionary psychology, and its findings are relevant for all animals, for cows, chickens, and humans too. Consider, for example, our passion for sweet and fatty foods. In the 21st century, there is no sense to this passion. In fact, it is destructive. Today, on Earth, many more people die of obesity and diabetes than from hunger, wars, and terrorism combined. The average person has a much greater chance of dying from overeating at McDonald's than from an Al-Qaeda attack. So why do we do this to ourselves? Because our world of feelings and sensations evolved to help us thrive not in today's industrial society, but in the world of our ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago in the African savanna. 50,000 years ago, an ancestor of mine was walking through the African savanna and ran into a tree full of ripe, sweet fruit. The right reaction in this situation was to eat as much fruit as possible, as soon as possible, before the baboons from the neighboring troop would eat them all. If my ancestor had a rare genetic mutation that would have made her dislike sweet and fatty foods, she probably would not have survived. When I open the refrigerator door in my house today and see chocolate cake, the DNA and the neurons in my brain do not realize that I live in the 21st century. They still think I am in the African savanna, hence I will feel a strong urge to eat the cake. The same applies to other animals as well. Consider, for example, the need for puppies to play. Why do they like to play so much? Because tens of thousands of years ago, a game was necessary for the vital survival of their ancestors, the wolves. Wolves are social animals. They cannot survive and reproduce unless they cooperate with other wolves. The way wolves learn the rules of the game in their society is largely by playing games. A wolf puppy who did not feel a strong urge to play due to a rare genetic mutation would not survive. What happens if today we take a small puppy, isolate him in a cage, give him water, food, and medicine, and when he reaches puberty, take his sperm and inseminate a female dog in heat? This puppy no longer needs to play to survive, but he will still feel a strong urge to play, which is why if we keep him locked in a cage his whole life, he will be very miserable, despite receiving food and shelter. This is because his emotional needs do not reflect his present state, but rather the influence of earlier evolutionary processes. This is also true for farm animals, of course. Even if farmers provide their cows and chickens with sufficient food, water, medicine, and shelter, they ignore their emotional and social needs, and these animals experience intense suffering. We can, of course, pose the difficult question of whether it is right to attribute emotions and social needs to animals. Aren't we guilty of humanizing animals? Like a little boy who runs into a table and imagines the table hurt him intentionally, having feelings and intentions as if it were a human being. Well, to the best of scientists' understanding, this is by no means humanizing. Emotions are not some spiritual trait that God has given only to humans, so they can write poetry and enjoy music. Emotions are biochemical mechanisms that have evolved through natural selection processes to allow animals to solve the problems they encounter every day, so they can survive and multiply. To the best of our knowledge, all mammals and birds, and at least some reptiles and fish, have feelings. Therefore, when I say the cow has feelings, I do not view the cow as a human being. I view her as a mammal, and that's fine because, indeed, she is a mammal. What does it mean that emotions are biochemical mechanisms for problem solving? Consider the following problem, for example. A baboon sees a bunch of bananas hanging on a tree, but notices a lion not far from the tree. Should the monkey try to get the bananas and risk being devoured by the lion? Basically, this is a mathematical problem of calculating probabilities. Is the probability that the monkey will starve if he does not eat the bananas greater than the probability that he will be devoured by the lion if he tried to get them? To solve the problem, the monkey has to take many variables into account. What is the distance between me and the bananas? How far is the lion from the bananas? What is my maximum running speed? What is the lion's running speed? Is the lion full and sleepy, or is he hungry and alert? And what about the bananas? 3 small green bananas are a completely different story from 10 big ripe bananas. But these external variables are not sufficient. To make a truly wise decision, the monkey must also take his internal state into account. What is the level of energy in his body? If he has very little energy, he may starve to death. So it is worth taking a risk, even a high one, for the bananas. If the monkey has a lot of energy at the moment and the bananas are nothing more than a luxury, it's not worth taking the risk. All these variables should be calculated. If the calculation is accurate, the monkey will survive and pass his genes on. An overly cowardly monkey, one who attributes too much severity to danger, will starve to death, and the genes that shaped the cowardly monkey will not be passed on to the next generation. A reckless monkey, one who does not attach sufficient importance to danger, will be eaten by the lion, and the reckless genes will not be passed on to the next generation. Evolution is based on statistics, which filter the various species every minute of every day, and the next generation receives the genes of the animals whose calculations have optimally calculated the data. But how exactly does the calculation process take place? The monkey does not pull a pencil out from behind his ear, a notebook from the inside pocket of his suit, and start calculating running speeds and energy levels. The monkey also does not have a calculator. The monkey's body and feelings are the calculator. What we refer to in our everyday language as emotions, feelings, and sensations are actually calculations. The monkey feels hungry or full. He senses the lion as more or less threatening. He feels temptation or repulsion for the bananas. In a fraction of a second, the monkey will experience a rush of sensations, feelings, and desires, which is the process of the calculation, and the result of the process will also be expressed as a feeling. The monkey will suddenly be filled with lust and courage. His chest will swell. He will breathe deeply. All his muscles will stretch out and then go to the bananas. Or he will be filled with fear. His shoulders will be bent, and all his muscles will relax. Oh, Mama, there's a lion here! Help! and sometimes the numbers balance so well that it is difficult to reach a decision, and the monkey will be filled with confusion and hesitation. Yes, no, should I not? Damn it, I don't know what to do. Obviously, there are differences between the feelings of different animals, such as monkeys and cows, and between the feelings of human beings. There are unique emotions that are characteristic of humans only. Shame, for example, is probably such an emotion. Cows do not, to our knowledge, feel shame. There are probably also unique feelings for other animals, which we do not know of course. But there are basic emotions common to all mammals. Perhaps the most basic emotion that defines mammals is the love between a mother and her offspring. Indeed, this emotion gives mammals their name. The word mammal comes from the Latin mamma, meaning breast. The emotional system that defines me and you as mammals is one where mothers love their offspring so much that they allow them to suckle from their body, and the youngsters, on their side, feel an overwhelming desire to bond with their mothers and stay near them. A baby mammal who, for some reason, was born indifferent to his mother would not survive for long. A mammalian mother who was born indifferent to her offspring due to a rare mutation may live a long and comfortable life, but her genes will not pass on to future generations. This system works the same way with cows, dogs, whales, and hedgehogs. And since little mammals cannot survive without close maternal help, other emotions can be debated. But it is clear that maternal love and a strong bond between a mother and her offspring characterize all mammals. It took scientists many years to recognize this. Until recently, psychologists questioned the existence and importance of the emotional bond between mother and offspring, even in humans. In the first half of the 20th century, psychology was dominated by the behaviorist approach, which argued that the relationship between parents and children was based on material feedback, that all that children need is food, medicine, and shelter, and that children are attached to their parents only because they provide for their material needs. Children who also demanded warmth, hugs, and kisses were considered spoiled, and child care experts warned parents that if they embraced or kissed their children, the children would grow up to be dependent and egotistical and lack self-confidence. John Watson, one of the best-known experts in childhood at the time, recommended to parents in 1928, never hug or kiss your children and never let them sit on you. If you must, kiss them once on the forehead when you say goodnight. In the morning, settle for a handshake. The magazine Infant Care, popular among American parents in the 1920s and 1930s, explained to parents that the right principles for raising children were to maintain discipline and satisfy their material needs on a regular schedule. In a 1929 issue, parents were told that when a toddler cries because he is hungry when it is time for food, do not hold him, do not swing him so he will stop crying, and don't feed him unless it is the exact time of eating. It will not hurt the baby to cry, even a newborn baby. One of the people who ended up challenging this approach was the American psychologist Harry Harlow, who specialized in primate research. In the 1950s and 1960s, Harlow conducted a series of experiments on rhesus monkeys. He separated small monkeys from their mothers immediately after birth and raised them in isolated cages. Harlow put a mother monkey doll into each cage. One mother was a doll made of metal wires. It was equipped with a bottle of milk that the monkey could suck. A second mother was made of wood with a coating of cloth and velvet to give her the same feeling as a real monkey, but she did not have a bottle. In keeping with the basic assumptions of behavioral psychology, Harlow guessed that the little monkeys would cling to a metal mother who supplied their material needs and would not be interested in the useless velvet mother. To Harlow's surprise, the monkeys clung to the velvet mother and preferred to spend almost all their time with her. From time to time, they went to the metal mother to nurse milk, but then they immediately returned to the arms of the velvet mother. Harlow guessed that the monkeys were cold and that they clung to the velvet mother to warm up. He installed a white light bulb inside the metal mother so that she would emit more warmth than the velvet. It did not help. Most of the monkeys continued to favor the velvet mother so much so that when the two mothers were placed close together, The monkeys continued to hang on to the velvet mother even when they were suckling from the metal mother's milk bottle. Harlow concluded that the monkeys were looking to the velvet mother for something beyond nutrition and body heat. They were looking for an emotional bond. Millions of years of evolution had imprinted a strong need for emotional attachment in the baby monkeys, as well as the assumption that there is a better chance of developing an emotional bond with soft and furry things than hard and metallic things. This is why small children develop emotional bonds with dolls, blankets, and rags, and not with wooden blocks, stones, and forks. For those baby monkeys, the need for an emotional bond was so great that they abandoned the feeding iron doll and turned their attention to the only object in the environment that seemed to be able to satisfy this need. Unfortunately, the velvet mother did not really create an emotional bond with them. Therefore, even though all of their material needs were provided, the monkeys grew up with many psychological complexes, and, in adulthood, failed to integrate into monkey society and produce their own offspring. Harlow's research, though cruel to the monkeys, helped revolutionize the understanding of human emotional bonding. Today, it is clear to every reasonable person that children, from their very first day, have emotional needs, and that their mental and physical health depends on satisfying these needs no less than the supply of food, medicines, and shelter. This is of course true not only for human children, but also for the offspring of other mammals. After all, Harlow's research was not conducted on sapiens. Like the experts on child-rearing a century ago, farmers throughout history also focused on the material needs of calves, lambs, and foals, and tended to ignore their emotional needs, except in cases where this emotional need served the interests of humans. Thus, for example, the dairy industry, since the agricultural revolution and to the present day, is based on breaking the most basic emotional bond in the mammalian world and separating the offspring from the mother. A cow will not give milk unless she has given birth to a calf, and therefore dairy farmers make sure the cows will give birth to more and more calves. But the calves are separated from their mothers shortly after they are born, and they pass their childhood without the touch of their mother's tongue, her nipples, or her body. What Harry Harlow did on a small scale, to a few hundred rhesus mother monkeys and baby monkeys, the dairy industry is doing to hundreds of millions of individuals. Today, more than 90% of the world's large animals are farm animals: cows, pigs, sheep, and chickens. Billions of animals with a rich world of feelings, emotions, sensations, needs, and fears pass their lives as machines for producing meat, milk, and eggs in industrial production lines. It is the responsibility of each and every one of us to be aware of the immense suffering that we humans are causing these animals, and to do our best to reduce this suffering. Melanie Joy's book is an important and groundbreaking contribution to the struggle for the welfare of animals. It explains eloquently how the global system of animal exploitation has been created, what keeps it going, and how it puts an unbearable burden on billions of creatures, while most of us fail to pay attention or feel any need to change the situation. This book helps us step outside of the box of Carnism, so that we are better positioned to think critically and be part of the solution, helping to create a more compassionate and sustainable world. Yuval Noah Harari, author of Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Chapter 1. To Love or to Eat. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. Anais Nin. Imagine for a moment the following scenario. You are a guest at an elegant dinner party. You're seated with the other guests at an ornately set table. The room is warm, candlelight flickers across crystal wine glasses, and the conversation is flowing freely. Mouth-watering smells of rich foods emanate from the kitchen. You haven't eaten all day, and your stomach is growling. At last, after what feels like hours, your friend who is hosting the party emerges from the kitchen with a steaming pot of savory stew. The aromas of meat, seasonings, and vegetables fill the room. You serve yourself a generous portion, and after eating several mouthfuls of tender meat, you ask your friend for the recipe. I'd be happy to tell you, she replies. You begin with 5 pounds of golden retriever meat, well marinated, and then... Golden retriever? You probably freeze mid-bite as you consider her words. The meat in your mouth is from a dog. What now? Do you continue eating? Or are you revolted by the fact that there's golden retriever on your plate, and you've just eaten some? Do you pick out the meat and eat the vegetables around it? If you are like most people, particularly in the Western world, when you hear that you've been eating dog, your feelings would automatically change from pleasure to some degree of revulsion. You might also become turned off by the vegetables in the stew, as if they were somehow tainted by the meat. But let's suppose that your friend laughs and says she was playing a practical joke. The meat isn't golden retriever, after all, but beef. How do you feel about your food now? Is your appetite fully restored? Do you resume eating with the same enthusiasm you had when you first began your meal? Chances are, even though you know that the stew on your plate is exactly the same food you were savoring just moments earlier, you would have had some residual emotional discomfort that might continue to affect you the next time you sit down to beef stew. What's going on here? Why is it that certain foods cause such emotional reactions? How can a food, given one label, be considered highly palatable, and that same food, given another, become virtually inedible? The stew's main ingredient, meat, didn't really change at all. It was animal flesh to begin with, and it remained that way. It just became, or seemed to for a moment, meat from a different animal. Why is it that we have such radically different reactions to beef and dog meat? The answer to these questions can be summed up by a single word: perception. We react differently to different types of meat not because there is a physical difference between them, but because our perception of them is different. The problem with eating dogs. Such a shift in perception can feel like a shift in lanes on a 2-lane road. Crossing the yellow line radically alters our experience. The reason we can have such a powerful response to a shift in perception is because our perceptions determine, in large part, our reality. How we perceive a situation, the meaning we make of it, determines what we think and how we feel about it. In turn, our thoughts and feelings often determine how we will act. Most people perceive dog meat very differently than they do beef. Therefore, dog meat evokes very different mental, emotional, and behavioral responses. One reason we have such different perceptions of beef and dog meat is because we view cows and dogs very differently. The most frequent, and often the only, contact we have with cows is when we eat or wear them. But for a large number of people, our relationship with dogs is, in many ways, not terribly different from our relationship with people. We call them by their names. We say goodbye when we leave and greet them when we return. We share our beds with them. We play with them. We buy them gifts. We carry their pictures in our wallets. We take them to the doctor when they're sick and may spend thousands of dollars on their treatment. We bury them when they pass away. They make us laugh. They make us cry. They are our helpers, our friends, our family. We love them. We love dogs and eat cows not because dogs and cows are fundamentally different. Cows, like dogs, have feelings, preferences, and consciousness, but because our perception of them is different, and consequently, our perception of their meat is different as well. Not only do our perceptions of meat vary based on the species of animal it came from, but different humans may also perceive the same meat differently. For example, a Hindu might have the same response to beef as an American Christian would to dog meat. These variations in our perceptions are due to our schema. A schema is a psychological framework that shapes and is shaped by our beliefs, ideas, perceptions, and experiences, and it automatically organizes and interprets incoming information. For example, when you hear the word nurse, you probably envision a woman who wears a medical uniform and works in a hospital. Even though a number of nurses are male, dress non-traditionally, or work outside of a hospital, unless you are frequently exposed to nurses in a variety of settings, your schema will maintain this generalized image. Generalizations are the result of schemas doing what they're supposed to, sorting through and interpreting the vast amount of stimuli we're constantly exposed to, and then putting it into general categories. Schemas act as mental classification systems. We have a schema for every subject, including animals. An animal can be classified, for instance, as prey, predator, pest, pet, or food. How we classify an animal, in turn, determines how we relate to them, whether we hunt them, flee from them, exterminate them, love them, or eat them. Some overlap can occur between categories. An animal can be prey and food. But when it comes to meat, or eggs, or dairy products, most animals are either food or not food. In other words, we have a schema that classifies animals as edible or inedible. And something interesting happens when we are confronted with the meat, eggs, or dairy from an animal we've classified as inedible. We automatically picture the living animal from whom it came, and we tend to feel disgusted at the notion of eating it. The perceptual process follows this sequence. Golden retriever meat. Stimulus. Inedible animal. Belief/perception. Image of living dog. Thought. Disgust. Feeling. Refusal or reluctance to eat. Action. Let's go back to our imagined dinner party when you were told you were eating golden retriever. Had such a situation actually occurred, you would have smelled the same smells and tasted the same flavors as you had just moments before. But now your mind probably would have formed a picture of a golden retriever, perhaps bounding across a yard chasing a ball, curled up next to a fire, or running alongside a jogger. And with these images would likely come emotions such as empathy or concern for the dog who had been killed and thus disgust at the thought of eating that animal. In contrast, if you are like most people, when you sit down to eat beef, you don't envision the animal from whom the meat was derived. Instead, you simply see food, and you focus on its flavor, aroma, and texture. When confronted with beef, we generally skip the part of the perceptual process that makes the mental connection between meat and the living animal. Sure, we all know that beef comes from an animal, but when we eat it, we tend to avoid thinking about this fact. Literally thousands of people with whom I have spoken, both through my professional work and personally, have admitted that if they actually thought about a living cow while eating beef, they would feel uneasy, and sometimes even unable to eat it. This is why many people avoid eating meat that resembles the animal from whom it was procured. Rarely is our meat served with the head or other body parts intact. In one interesting study, for instance, Danish researchers found that people were uncomfortable eating meat that resembled its animal source, preferring to eat minced meat rather than whole cuts of meat. Yet even if we do make the conscious connection between beef and cows, we still feel less disturbed eating beef than we would eating golden retriever, since, in many cultures, dogs are not meant to be eaten. How we feel about an animal and how we treat them, it turns out, has much less to do with what kind of animal they are than about what our perception of them is. We believe it's appropriate to eat cows, but not dogs, so we perceive cows as edible and dogs as inedible, and act accordingly. And this process is cyclical. Not only do our beliefs ultimately lead to our actions, but our actions also reinforce our beliefs. The more we don't eat dogs and do eat cows, the more we reinforce the belief that dogs are inedible and cows are edible. Acquired taste. While human beings may have an innate tendency to favor sweet flavors, sugar having been a useful source of calories, and to avoid those that are bitter and sour, such flavors often indicate a poisonous substance, most of our taste is, in fact, made up. In other words, within the broad repertoire of the human palate, we like the foods we've learned we're supposed to like. Food, particularly food from animals, is highly symbolic, and it is this symbolism, coupled with and reinforced by tradition, that is largely responsible for our food preferences. For example, few people enjoy eating caviar until they're old enough to realize that liking caviar means they're sophisticated and refined. And in China, people eat animals' penises because they believe these organs affect sexual function. Despite the fact that taste is largely acquired through culture, people around the world tend to view their preferences as rational and any deviation as offensive and disgusting. For instance, many people are disgusted at the thought of drinking.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?